What's going on, workforce? Brian here.
Chris here.
And today we've got a really hot topic. Really curious to see your thoughts. We put out a poll on the channel, and honestly, this is one that has been debated within the community for a long time. Anybody hoping for PS3 assets to become a thing of the past, I think you're going to really enjoy this episode. Chris, before we dive in, how's it going, dude?
It's going good. Yeah, so this comes off of the heels of the Xbox announcement. So like it's a good week to be a gamer for me anyway, because as somebody who has an Xbox Game Pass subscription, any remaining minutes, seconds, hours, whole days that I have just been eaten up. Like they have just offered us an immense amount of gameplay at no additional cost.
Right. So to set some context for anybody who might not, know what we're talking about, Phantasy Star Online 2 just yesterday announced that they their new Genesis project, in which that they're honoring basically their existing game and a whole new game that takes place within PSO2 1,000 years into the future. So there's definitely some parallels that we might be able to draw from Final Fantasy XIV 1.0 to 2.0. There's some parallels in which that we can draw from World of Warcraft, Cataclysm, all happening within the same world itself. There's always been a challenge at taking gamers from an environment, from a game, and moving them into a new game. And so many people have wanted, and we see this comment come up a lot, hey, I want to get rid of these PS3 assets. Yoshi-P's usually asked about it once a year, like clockwork, and he talks about just how much work that would be. And we also know that Yoshi-P's been working on a new project that basically kicked back in 2016. So there's obviously lots of different opinions on the table, and yours is important to us, so let us know what you're thinking in the comments below. But I do put out a poll, so we have some results, early results, that I'm kind of curious. Chris, before we dive into those results, though, you've been a long WoW player. WoW, just with Shadowlands, is doing a level squish all the way down. So there's different ways this can go about. Can you explain how WoW is doing it?
Yeah, so we're watching all games kind of struggle with what happens over age. So Shadowlands is, I mean, we have a lot of WoW expansions, a ridiculous number of WoW expansions. Very few people have played all of them, at least throughout the majority of that. They may have played all of them at launch, but very few people have stuck with it because it's a long running game. So the problem with that is there came a point where leveling up just brought you through different ways a class matured, total rotation shifts, dungeons you just couldn't find groups for, knowing where the quests went. You had different storylines, and not all of it really mattered to everybody. And it was just an immense amount of playtime to get people into the current stuff, which is what you see in the promos and the trailers and the events, and it's what everybody's talking about. So it's like, oh, you because you did nothing wrong deserve this 1,000-hour grind to get to the game that you thought you purchased. So what they did is they started giving out free. The first thing they did is they gave out free, basically, level jumps, which is a huge controversy item in the 14 community on if you should even use those.
I think it's still a controversy item within these games altogether. Yeah, like hands down. Now, I don't make any judgment to anybody who uses it, because I think it's a quality of the character or the player who goes and figures out how to play the game versus just jumping headfirst into content. But I still think it's, like, I don't want to say lazy. I still think it's the cheap and profitable way that you can kind of go about.
If you're selling them, yes. If you purchase them like that, yes, you're profiting off of them. I have yet to be in a game where I feel all the people at Cap are amazing players and they don't have a skip potion. I have yet to be in a game where I feel like, man, I did just enough fetch quests that I really got my rotation down. That's me being a little sarcastic there, but like, I don't think questing makes you a better player. I think doing the content that you want to be better at makes you a better player. So if you want to know the lore, questing helps. If you want to be good at dungeons, run dungeons. If you want to be good at PvP, play PvP. I don't think questing makes you better at all aspects of the game. So skipping quests, I don't know that that's the big point of contention. So what WoW did is basically when you get a level boost potion, you get tossed into this little private zone, and if you start there, you get a chance to kind of go through a feeler on that class, and you get taught some basics that a quest would never teach you. And then you get tossed out into the world, and you get tossed out into the world roughly at the beginning of kind of the current expansion. Just this is all generalizations. It's worked a little different over the years. But basically for 14 players, since that's most of who hangs out here at Work to Game, have at least touched 14, it would be like dropping you at the beginning of Shadowbringers. So you would pick up a level 70 character, and you would play like a brief little like series of class quests, and then you would be released into Shadowbringers. Now it doesn't give you a lot of feel for the lore, but WoW up until recent history hasn't been as lore based as 14. They've moved a lot more in lore direction. So that's been kind of how they've handled it. With Shadowlands, what they're shifting to is they're saying, if you wanted to level up a character before, what you would do is you would go level through these zones. They've shortened the experience so much that if you want to level a character legit in WoW, you actually don't finish expansions. So you'd go through like the first 2 zones of Stormblood, and then you'd be done with Stormblood. And so it's leaving people feeling really fragmented, because your only 2 choices are to skip to the end or to play through, where you get these fragments from each expansion. And so they've even shortened it to where you're like going every other expansion, and then there's gear that accelerates it even faster. And so it's just this really shattered experience at this point. It just doesn't function. So what they're now doing is they're going to say, okay, we're creating like a greatest hits album, and that's going to be the starting point for all new accounts. All new accounts are going to go in here, and you're going to play through the early levels, like 1 through 15-ish for most games. And in that, it's going to finish with a dungeon. There's going to be a big baddie. We're going to teach you the basics of the game. And this is going to be something that ideally they're curating so that it stays relevant. This is that starting zone, and it's meant to teach you how to play our game, how to play. That's the most important thing. And it'll be themed and stuff, so you get a general idea there. Then you'll be tossed into the most recent expansion. They're going to toss you into Battle for Azeroth. The reason for that is they feel that a community is built around people all knowing a similar story, right? So when we move into the next expansion, people who didn't play Shadowbringers are going to feel lost, because that's what we're still going to be talking about. And so they want you to play the most recent expansion, and then you'll play through it kind of at a somewhat accelerated pace, but you'll finish it, and then you'll be launched into the current expansion. So it's a little less forgiving than the skip potion, but it's way more forgiving than having to play through 20 years of content.
Right.
So that's how they're doing things now. If you have created a character before, then what you would do instead is you would have an option to play through the starter zone. You don't have to, and then you can pick an expansion of your choice, and each expansion has been scaled to act as that Battle for Azeroth experience. So by the time you create multiple characters, you could have one character that you started in each expansion. You could have that experience, and then all of them will go through Shadowlands. So that's how they're kind of handling things moving forward. To kind of parlay off that, how 14 does things, since we're about to talk about BFA, is that you either have to buy a skip potion for level and or story.
The story, yeah.
And then you have to level all the way up, or you buy that skip, and that's it. And there's New Game Plus that's now going to be available on all of them, but it's still ultimately play through all this content or don't. There really isn't a hybrid. Right. So even though they're shortening ARR, it's still a long grind.
So what's really kind of interesting about what we've learned just from New Genesis PSO2 just yesterday, and what they confirmed this morning, is that that's basically they're closing the chapter on the current story for PSO2, and then the new story takes place 1,000 years into the future. Sure. And so your character, you can actually transition between the 2 worlds, right? It's all, I think it sounds like it's all even one client, where you're like, all right, I want to go and play this era, or I want to go play in the previous era. And the new era ends up being open world, like it's they're changing the game, they're changing the battle system, they're changing like so much. Now there's going to be some similarities, of course. So what I find this really fascinating, and why I think this is going to be an interesting case study, is it doesn't have anybody leaving the PSO2 ecosystem. Where this is different from 14 1.0 to 2.0, and we'll see here in some comments. I think there's one real snarky comment. So try not to laugh too much at it. But it's that in 1.0 to 2.0, they actually destroyed 1.0. You can't go visit 1.0. The story does continue. Correct. Your character, your progress, all that continued from 1.0 to 2.0. And in PSO, that's not the case. It's basically a new character, even though you can say and have them look obviously enhanced, because it's a whole new graphics engine. I think the graphics engine is and the game engine's what's the most important piece of this that I'm kind of curious to get everybody's thoughts on. But with that upgrade and with that time jump, your fashion, anything you spent money on, because as a free-to-play game, anything that you invested into your character, like inventory space, like all that is honored and carries forward. Anything that would break the in-game economy of the new game, like Meseta, doesn't. So there are like certain restrictions and things like that. But what I find ultimately fascinating about all of this, and even to the point where even back in the day when they were first planning out 14 1.0. They even had an idea in which that you could go into your Mog house in Final Fantasy XI, and then you could also step into the world of 14. So game companies and even Square Enix was trying to think of a way of, like, how do we have this game and have it continue and have you, you know, you don't have to sit here and say goodbye to your friends, right? Imagine if you were playing, you know, 14, you know, Shadowbringers or 6.0 or whatever we end up calling it. And then it's like, hey, by the way, that kind of concludes the Zodiac Hydaelyn story. And then from a, hey, here's a whole new generation. Here's a new starting point. Here's a new engine. Here's new system requirements. I know a lot of people are like, yeah, we don't have PS3 assets. Here's the bare minimum for the new generation or whatever.
Yeah.
But we don't have to now abandon like we did with 1.0. You can still go play Heavensward. You can still go play Shadowbringers. You can still have that experience. And imagine if you're like, hey, Brian, I'm farming mounts.
Is so bold.
I'm farming mounts in, I'm trying to get that Rathalos mount. Oh, okay. I was in 7.0 or 14.2 or whatever the heck. I'm just, boom. Now I'm there with you. Same character, for the most part, different progression systems, obviously starting over. This has been a conversation that the community's been having for a long time. And so I was really like blown away by what PSO2 is doing, because it's challenging that aspect. Can you, keep everybody engaged, honor and reward, not like Destiny 2 where they took away everything. It's like, hey, your character, we're going to honor that. And then it's like, by the way, everything's gone. You have no, trophies of your 1.0 experience, just your character, which you can't physically change. But in 14, it's like, imagine that being something that was what yoshi-p was working on. So then you don't have to then sit here and say, because a lot of people will be like, who have a great love for 14 as a game, you don't have to sit here and say, hey, we're abandoning 14. It's like, no. Right. The story just happens to, take place 1,000 years. Like, I think we were kind of, I was like, hey, Chris, you want to talk about it? You gave an example of like the warrior light is no longer needed, but then in like 1,000 years, like, oh, we need to come back. We've been
imagine
dormant.
Our current storyline and the current things going on, and anything with Hydaelyn and all of that all resolves itself, and the shards resolve themselves, and it's all just dealt with. Every controversy, every conflict wraps up in a nice, neat close. Doesn't have to be the end of the game, right? You can say, okay, we're going to fast forward through time, however much time, where conflict has built up enough to justify the Warrior of Light needing to return. And then we would return as this new reincarnated, or however they want to handle it, right? This new call to action, which is awesome. Like, so WoW has reused same zones, and you can go back and visit old versions, and you can definitely see the difference in the textures. I know not everybody likes WoW's graphic style, but there's definitely a difference. And when you equip old glamour, transmog, whatever you want to call it, old cosmetics, you can see the difference in like a shoulder pad that looks really clunky and has like 2 textures on it, and like a new one. They do look different, but it's not a new game. It's still largely the same. It feels like the same engine in many ways. It can do things it couldn't do before, but it feels rooted in the same system. The problem with 14 is that it's been so limited by that. This would be like being able to visit 1.0. This could be that stark of a difference. This could make, if we call all of our current stuff 2.0, forget Heavensward and all that, call this all 2.0, then when we move to 3.0,
I can see the comment right now, forget Heavensward.
This would be a chance to come back and visit the current 14 as it exists, and make that level of a tech jump again. I mean, the tech jump between 1.0 and 2.0 was massive. Imagine if we could move into a 3.0 of sorts, and leave all of these issues behind, all of the issues that lead to all sorts of design decisions that aren't necessarily what yoshi-p's team visualized. It's just what they got stuck with, because this is what's possible. It'd be really exciting. I'm excited for PSO2. I played it a little with you, and then I played a little on my own. And what I found is when a game gets so out of date, right, when it becomes like a N64 Super Nintendo level of graphics, it doesn't age well. It starts to feel like we've learned so much. It's not just the graphics. I can play an 8-bit new game and enjoy it. It's that also we've gotten better as an industry. They've gotten better at designing quests. They've gotten better at voice acting. They've gotten better at writing. They've gotten better at combat systems. Everything's improved. And so if you go back, the only thing that makes you feel good is if there's a nostalgia to it. So either the graphic style or the game itself or the storylines it's telling all relate to you. So I don't know. I'm excited by it. I think that 14 could do the same thing, and have a lot of benefit.
So I want to dive in now into some of y'all's comments, because we put up this poll, and so far the results are, over 347 of you guys voted. Current PSO2 is getting an upgraded graphics engine, and PSO2 new Genesis is the new game. Both share your characters and are shared, but progress, fashion, things like that's shared, but your level isn't. Would you like something similar in the world of Final Fantasy XIV? And 67% vote heck yes. Then we have 25% saying no thanks, I want a brand new Final Fantasy MMORPG. Yoshi-P has alluded to this project. We assume it's an MMO. There's lots of things, lots of excitement around that as we learn more about it. And then I also had wait what, tell me more, and I said see Ginger Prime for more details. 7% of that have voted. I'm going to start with the snarkiest of comments that we have here from Nesevi. Says yes, that's what ARR was. Kind of sad not to realize it as a Final Fantasy YouTuber. I can't help but just read that real negative.
Okay, well, time has changed again.
No, it's not the same as it was with ARR. ARR is gone. You cannot go play. Not ARR 1.0 is gone. You cannot go play it. That was also a whole different scenario for the game. That was like right out the game where it failed. So like if anybody's going to sit here and say, and honestly, I don't appreciate any of the bashing of 1.0. I really enjoyed it, especially when Yoshi-P took over the project. They really got things going. It was a sandbox MMORPG, and we actually lost a lot in 2.0. So everybody here sitting here, who loves, if you love Shadowbringers, and you want to bash on, what 1.0 was, it's contradictory in my opinion, and I think you don't really actually have a true appreciation for the game. And I would question your fanhood of Final Fantasy. Thank you very much, Nisevi. I'm sorry, I just rubbed me the wrong way. But yeah, and I did put a poll in there saying no, keep Final Fantasy XIV the same way, because anybody who's sitting here and wants Final Fantasy XIV to be encased in ice and never evolve and never change and have this etc. just is only wishing for the game just to kind of wither etc. Like if you're not,
I think it's great that you're liking that spot in your life, right? Undergrad was like that for me. He'll be I loved undergrad. So from 18 to 22 years old, I didn't want anything to change because it was great. It's everything I wanted. I was just independent enough. There was just enough, taking out loans to pay my bills, not yet aware of how long it would take me to pay those back and the effort I would have to put in. It was great. Everything about that time in my life had these so many fond memories. And it's not that there wasn't pain and there wasn't bad days, but eventually I grew beyond that. And so as good as 14 might be for you now, to say that you'll be playing 14 and it'll still be one dungeon per patch, a trial, a raid, you're gonna want something different 10 years from now. And so they're gonna have to change. And then their hope is that they change into the thing that you end up wanting. Doesn't always work out, but ideally they change into something that you end up liking, but they're gonna have to take a risk at some point.
Yeah, and that's the thing where we've seen them take less risk because they're 14 1.0 was such a colossal failure, hurt the brand so much that it's like, okay, let's find something that works. And they found a great formula, but we see it. Not everybody sees it. I know a lot of people who are, don't do content. It's like, oh yeah, we see the comments. We see people quitting and angry and frustrated at the game all the time. The number of times I see people talk about the PS3 assets and how, for whatever reason, that's the reason they don't like the game. I think there's a deeper reason that they don't like the game. PS3 assets aren't it. But no matter what, people were like, are they going to ever update the engine? Are they going to update the graphics engine? Are they going to get rid of the spaghetti code? And I've, and this is probably where I'm definitely, I rub people the wrong way because they don't understand game development. It's easier to build a new game at this point than it is to do what you think it is to do in the game. It's going to take them 100 times longer to try and fix and do all the things that you think are easy, as opposed to them just saying, hey, let's just make a brand new game, brand new engine that has this in its framework and its base, and it's cheaper. And then the question is then, well, now are you abandoning the game? And I've never advocated for them to abandon the game. And that's why Phantasy Star's new Genesis thing is so interesting, even just from a case study perspective. It's like, hey, because they already confirmed not all the classes are going to be in New Genesis at the start, but they're going to work towards that. You'll have weapons that you can't equip because you're not at the appropriate level, but that weapon will carry forward into a way. They're going to honor it's just fascinating. It's just literally mind-blowing and fascinating. Sergi writes, I think if they can get this as a fantastic idea to tweak a little to their needs, it would be best. I don't want 14 to start dying as it's got so much potential. Also, they need to have new staff to handle this in order not to compromise the quality of yoshi-p's attention would be divided. Well, I mean, this is kind of where what we've been talking about, and whatever ends up coming to pass is going to be interesting because yoshi-p's already got his attention divided. He's got so much on his plate, and you can see it. A lot of people who follow the game as closely as we do, you feel it. We have conversations about this all the time. It's like the guy's got, you know, and he doesn't, and he talks about not leaving 14 for a long period of time. If they did something like this in a couple of years, like that would be him continuing to like both honor that promise and at the same time set expectations. What this also does is this prevents something like what WoW's doing with like a level squish and completely reworking the game to where they eventually have classic. It's like, it's just kind of like almost like these big chapters, these 10-year storied chapters of saying, hey, by the way, do you want to come play 14? Yeah, you know, this year it's 10 years old. It's 10 years old this August. That's a long ass time. So imagine if they were like, well, when it turns 14 or something, what a good number. Now it's like, that's the Zodiac Heidelin's chapter and story. And now we're going to have a whole nother thing that takes place. Same kind of, you know, so there's going to be some similarity. We're going to respect and honor all these things and achievements you've done. You don't lose like the thing is, I don't want anybody to lose access to Heavensward. I don't want anybody to lose access. And New Game Plus is an interesting way that they can kind of go about doing that. So thank you, Sergi, and thank you guys for the comments. It's just really interesting. A lot of people, you know, obviously were like, oh, that happened with ARR. And it's like, this is really different what PSO2 is doing versus what ARR did for this game, what WoW does, what Destiny does. Like everybody's trying to figure out this solution to the problem of what do you do with these games? So
if you don't hit a reset, so Destiny 2 is a good example of what a hard reset looks like. It gives you a chance to revisit the combat system, keep the things you like, and totally throw out the things you don't like, right? If they decided in 14 that they didn't like Dragoons, you could just not have a Dragoon in the next one. You could just delete it. Just gone, right? Sorry, guys. You floor tanked yourself into oblivion. That's it. You're gone. That's it. And if they want to split Black Mage into Thaumaturge and Time Mage, they could do that because it's a totally new combat system. If they choose to iterate and just continue to try to make each expansion take a step forward, they have to constantly bring forward relics of what the previous one constrained them to. And now the class, that's just a really simple example, but that could be restructures like number of people in a dungeon party. That could be, you know, is the healer tank DPS combo how we want to manage things? Is the way we're handling gearing how we want to handle things? Is the way we're handling combat with the way we time spells and global cooldowns, is that the pacing that we want? Because you can only change so much from expansion to expansion, but with a fresh start, you could turn this into anything you wanted. You could turn this into a turn-based game. You can turn it to anything you want. And so it gives them the ability to say, what are the dreams we always had, right? Brian and I talk about wanting modifiers on dungeons to go back and kind of make them kind of this Unreal trial, but like actually make it like a little bit harder, let you dial it to like Unreal to Unreal Extreme or Ultimate. And you can kind of add these modifiers and see how high you can go, a very like deep dungeon trial experience. That's not possible in the current system. yoshi-p answered that question straight up to us in person at the media event. With a new, fresh restart, it would be, but you would lose access to the current stuff. And so I think what PSO2 is doing is really admirable in that it gives them kind of a blend where they can hit the hard restart on a lot of things, but not quite everything. And then you can go back and you can play a previous, it's backward compatible, if you will. You can go back if you want. So when somebody falls in love with the current game, they can go back and with those rose-tinted glasses, visit where it was, and anything that's less perfect, like that's great. I can already see what it became, so they don't have to play through the old junk saying this is junk. Well, it's like, yeah, but it'll get better. No, play through the better stuff, and then if you like it, go back and learn deeper about how it got where it is.
Yeah, we see that a lot. That's actually one of the things that a lot of people gave me feedback on with the current version of PSO2. They're like, oh man, like, yeah, it looks like an old game. And while Final Fantasy XIV
feels like an old game,
looks like a great game. It's beautiful. You know, it's like still there's engine issues, there's content issues and things like that. And we do see the comments. We do see people who are like, I cannot play this game. I want to fall in love with it. Everybody says that it's good. It gets good at this point. And I just, you know, they struggle to get there. And it's like, man, like, you know, how do you honor and preserve what is good and then at the same time not have to abandon it? And I think what we're talking about today is like, it'll be interesting to see. I wonder if Square Enix is planning something like this, because yoshi-p, you know, made it clear that the 2016 project, that's 4 years now. You know, even when we were talking with Comic Storian, he's like, yeah, I feel like they're working on something else. Like a lot of people who follow the game closely, and especially when you start looking at what, you know, some label content squish, you know, feel like, yeah, like we're getting less. And it's like, okay, well, maybe. Or maybe something big is on the horizon. Maybe something really big is coming down the pipeline, and it will blow our minds. And the only reason why we get one dungeon less, and because it's like, yeah, the team, you know, he's got a whole other team working on that. And if they connect these two worlds, that will be, I think, perfect in my opinion. So who knows what we'll end up seeing, but we'll keep you guys apprised. As always, these are fun discussions, and we're always curious as your thoughts. So let us know in the comments below. Maybe we can see what we can do. Chris, I know you got to get back to work. I got to get back to work. So it's going to be a busy day. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button. Let us know if you are new here so we can welcome you officially to the workforce. But for Work to Game, my name's Brian.
My name's Chris.
Thanks so much for watching. We'll talk to you soon.